The Engwe M20 must be one of the coolest e-bikes around. At least subjectively, I think it looks stunning. It's also really comfortable to ride thanks to its dual shock absorber design and its really fat tyres, but more on that a little bit later. Now first off, you should know that the asking price is £1,050 if you want the singular 13 amp hour battery pack model. If however you go for the dual battery pack model, which we have right here, it will set you back £1,400. It's also worth considering that you can also purchase an additional 19.2 amp hour battery pack, which will cost you an additional £350 for the singular battery pack model or £250 for the dual battery pack model. Now in this video, which has been sponsored by the manufacturer, I'll be covering everything you need to know about it so you can make your own informed purchasing decision. So to kick things off, let's talk about its electric range. And here the manufacturer claims that you'll get 35 kilometers or 21.7 miles from the singular battery pack model. If you were, however, to ride in mode 1, which is its weakest pedal assistance mode, you are supposedly going to get 75 kilometers of range or 46.6 miles. Now this actually gets even crazier if you go for the dual battery pack model. 70 kilometers of claimed range or 43.5 miles or a staggering 150 kilometers or 93.2 miles. Now for my own mixed riding test, and bearing in mind I was riding around in mode 5, which is the most powerful mode, and pretty much not even cycling all that much, and also that I am 70 kilograms in weight and had a small backpack, I achieved roughly 30 to 35 miles of range, which is actually pretty respectable and somewhat close to what the manufacturer is actually claiming. If you do remember, that is 43.5 miles on the dual battery pack model. Now for you to replenish the battery packs, you can of course plug it into charge. And here unfortunately there's only a singular charger, and therefore means that if you go for the dual battery pack model, you'll have to charge each battery independently. Now, each battery will actually take you 5 hours to replenish, so therefore going from 0 to 100%, therefore tallying up to 10 hours of charge time for you to actually get a full charge, at least for the dual battery pack model. Now thankfully the charger itself is actually quiet and therefore is not going to make any sort of noise or cause any sort of nuisance to your work colleagues. And furthermore, given that the battery packs themselves can be removed and locked within the bike, it gives you that extra bit of flexibility. You can indeed take it out of the bike and charge it, or of course leave it on the bike and charge it directly on the bike itself. Now the battery packs themselves can also be used independently, so therefore even if you go for the dual battery pack model and for example you've run out of juice, you can also just use the singular battery pack. Of course this will reduce your overall range. Now here you have also got a USB port on each of the battery packs, which also allows you to discharge the batteries, for example if you just want to charge a smartphone. Now this brings me on to performance, and here you have got a 750 watt brushless motor that's planted at the back of the bike, and that delivers up to 1 kilowatt of peak power and 55 newton meters of torque, at least according to the manufacturer. Now the claimed maximum speed is 15.5 miles an hour, which will comply with all the EU regulations. However, you can delimit it in certain instances via the settings, and therefore means I was actually able to achieve 26.5 miles an hour, at least according to the speedometer that's present on the LCD display. This equates to 42.6 kilometers an hour, which is actually pretty nippy. Now as for the gears, you've got a Shimano 7-speed setup, which is rather basic but will suffice for most individuals. In this respect, it means that you can actually ride the bike as a regular push-on bicycle, but of course here if you're going to be using any sort of pedal assistance, you're not going to have to worry about it because you have got the throttle on the right hand side. Now, it's worth noting over here that unlike some other bikes, including from Engwe themselves, there is no sort of cruise control, which I do think is a bit of a missed trick given this bike is kind of a cruiser. Now this does actually perfectly bring me onto comfort, and here those 20 by 4 inch fat tyres do a phenomenal job of soaking up a lot of the anomalies. Furthermore, it gives you plenty of confidence if you're going to be going off-road. In my case, I took it on some beaten up country roads and had no issues whatsoever. It gave me a lot of confidence while riding the M20, which isn't the same that could be said about the vast majority of its competitors. Now furthermore, you've also got a dual suspension design, and yes, you have got the front forks which are adjustable and therefore gives you the ability of adjusting the chamber, and you've also got one that just sits under you. Now the seat itself is actually pretty comfortable, and as someone who is roughly 70 kilograms and 6 foot tall, I had no problems whatsoever. However, this does lead me on to one of the things that you should consider before purchasing the M20, and that's the fact that the saddle itself cannot be adjusted. Therefore, going back on my point on the fact that I think the M20 is somewhat of a cruiser e-bike. This means that if you're going to be cycling a lot and using that 7-speed Shimano setup, then you just want to bear in mind that your knees might actually take a bit of a battering. In my case, I am just under 6 foot tall and it's not really suited for that. So therefore I did feel that while riding this bike, I just wanted to just use the throttle rather than actually using it as a regular bicycle. Elsewhere, it is also worth considering that you have got front and rear 160mm disc brakes with a mechanical control only. I would really suggest actually upgrading this if possible to a hydraulic system, because the bike itself actually weighs in pretty high, and therefore if you're going to be coming to a standstill in an emergency situation, you want to make sure that those disc brakes and of course the brake system itself can bring you to a standstill pretty quickly. This actually brings me onto its design, and the bike weighs in at 34.8 kilograms, but if you do add a battery pack, this takes it up to 42.7 kilograms, and if you add a secondary battery pack, a whopping 45.9 kilograms. Bearing in mind that is without adding any sort of additional extras, or of course adding yourself as the rider. Now this is quite high, so therefore it's just worth bearing that in mind in case you want to be carrying it up some stairs, despite the fact it has got an aluminium alloy frame. Now the frame itself is available in 3 different finishes. You've got white, black, or the pictured green, where I do think the latter looks absolutely stunning to say the least. You've also got a dual front LED light design, which gives it that sort of classic look and somewhat reminiscent of a regular motorbike. You've also got a headlight switch at the front, which you can enable by pressing a button on the left hand side of the handlebar, and you've also got rear lights as well, which are always on, at least if you have the front lights on. It is also worth bearing in mind that the rear light also does serve as a brake light, so therefore if you're going to be pressing the front or the rear brake, it will initiate the brake light, which can be quite handy when you're on the road. Now elsewhere you have got a singular seat, and you've also got front and rear mudguards which come included. There's also a kickstand which is actually pretty hefty and means that you can actually place the bike down without actually having to pose it on, for example, a lamppost. Now elsewhere you have got the ability of purchasing some additional extras, for example a rear rack, a rack bag, a phone mount, mirrors, a front basket, or even an anti-theft alarm. Now I would also like to conclude by adding the fact that you have got a monochrome LCD display which provides all the right information that you'll require, and there's also some in-depth settings that you can dive into, which I very much suggest if you're setting up the bike for the first time. This allows you to customize, for example, the max speed, or for example the tyres that are actually initiated on the bike itself to give you a more accurate speedometer reading. These settings are all very much explained in quite a lot of detail via the included manual. Finally, there is also a little horn that gives you the ability of attracting any sort of attention, and that is also built in directly onto the bike, where there's a little button just found by the headlight switch on the left hand side of the handlebar. So there we have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed my detailed overview of the Engwe M20. I'll be curious to know what you make of it down the comment section below, and if you would pick it over rival alternatives. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.